My husband's daughter humiliated me in front of the entire family. When I complained, my husband cut me off immediately. You're not her mother. Don't demand respect. I just smiled. The next day, I cut everything off. Her college, her apartment, her car, her phone, and her credit card. Everything vanished. I didn't say a single word when she came up and slapped me across the face. It was my stepdaughter's 21st birthday dinner, an expensive steakhouse. 20 relatives at the table, and I was paying the $3,000 bill. All I had done was ask Chloe to lower her voice because she was mocking the waiter. She didn't just react badly, she exploded. "You're a pathetic loser, Diane," she spat, her voice echoing through the suddenly silent restaurant. "You're just the woman who pays the bills. You have zero authority over me. You're nothing but a bank account in a designer blazer." Then she threw her wine glass. Red wine soaked through my white blouse. I looked at my husband, David, expecting him to step in, defend me, at least look horrified. Instead, David leaned closer and whispered loudly enough for the whole table to hear, "Sit down, Diane. You're embarrassing her. You're not her mother. Don't demand respect from a girl who owes you nothing." The table burst into laughter. The laughter lasted less than it felt like it did. 5, maybe 6 seconds, but in my mind it hung in the air like someone had held down a piano key too long. I saw David's cousin cover her mouth with her napkin. I saw Uncle Richard stare at his plate with a crooked smile. I saw the cousin's husband lean over and whisper something into her ear that made her laugh again, this time quieter. I saw Chloe, still standing there with the empty glass in her hand, drop it onto the table with a hard clink before sitting back down, satisfied. David, beside me, didn't even look at me. He picked up his napkin from his lap, folded it twice, and set it neatly beside his plate. Then he took a sip of water. The calmness of it all was what stunned me the most, like he had just settled a minor inconvenience. I stayed seated. The wine dripped down the collar of my blouse in a cold line against my skin. I could smell the sweet acidity of the Cabernet. I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes pretending not to look at me. The waiter Chloe had been mocking approached with a white towel in his hands and stopped about 3 ft away, unsure whether to come closer. I gave him a small gesture that meant, "It's fine." He nodded and stepped away. I didn't answer David. I didn't answer Chloe. I didn't look at anyone who had laughed. I picked up my napkin, carefully wiped my chin and neck, folded the napkin into quarters, and placed it beside my untouched glass of white wine. "Dessert?" David's sister called from the other end of the table in a high-pitched voice, clearly trying to change the subject. She waved at the waiter. "Can we get dessert menus?" The waiter returned with 11 menus and passed them around the table. When he reached me, he handed mine over with a small nod. I opened it, read every line carefully. Dark chocolate tart with sea salt, Madagascar vanilla creme brulee, yuzu cheesecake, artisan ice cream trio. I read the prices too. 24, 26, 22, 18. If all 20 people ordered dessert, it would add another $450 to the bill, plus coffee, plus after-dinner drinks, plus tip. "I'm getting the cheesecake," Chloe announced loudly as if nothing had happened. "And a double espresso." "I'll take the chocolate tart," said David's cousin. "Creme brulee for me," Uncle Richard added. Everyone ordered. David's sister even wrote down the choices on her napkin like she was officially managing the birthday dinner. When it reached my turn, I looked up from the menu. "I'm not having anything," I said calmly. David's sister paused for half a second too long, unsure how to react. David stayed perfectly still beside me. "Are you sure, Diane?" his sister asked with a polite smile. "Yes." "Well, all right." The waiter collected the menus and walked away. Conversation slowly returned around the table in smaller groups. Vacations, traffic, someone's new house. No one spoke to me. I sat there in my stained blouse, hands resting on my lap, staring at the centerpiece of white hydrangeas leaning slightly toward my side of the table. And in those next few minutes, I thought about strange things. I thought about my father who had died 2 years earlier. I remembered something he once told me when I was 32 and about to marry David. We had been standing alone in his kitchen while he poured coffee. Without looking at me, he had said, "Sweetheart, some men choose you because they love you. Others choose you because you're useful." At the time, I had dismissed it as bitter old man advice. Now, sitting there with wine soaking into my blouse, the sentence came back with the clarity of something spoken 5 minutes ago. Then my thoughts became more practical. Automatic payments, monthly withdrawals, every contract I had signed over the years, every guarantee, every authorization, and how many of those signatures were still active at that exact moment while I sat there humiliated in that restaurant. Probably all of them. I started mentally listing them one by one. Chloe's tuition came directly out of my checking account every semester. Her apartment lease was in her name, but I was the guarantor. The car loan was under my credit. The family phone plan, 5 lines, my account, the supplementary credit card, my signature as the primary holder, health insurance, car insurance, gym membership, streaming subscriptions, everything. 14, 15, 16 separate payments, maybe more. Every one of them had a phone number, a customer service department, a cancellation process. I estimated the timing in my head. If I started at 7:30 the next morning, I could shut everything down before noon. "Diane, are you all right?" David's mother asked from across the table. It was the first time anyone had spoken directly to me since the wine incident. I looked up, smiled slightly. "I'm perfect," I said. She nodded awkwardly and returned to her coffee. David finally turned toward me. For the first time in 15 minutes, he actually looked at my face. He expected anger, humiliation, something. But whatever he saw there, he didn't recognize it. His eyebrows pulled together slightly, like someone trying to read a language they thought they understood. "Are you really okay?" he whispered softly enough that only I could hear. Yes, Diane, about Chloe. You don't need to explain anything. What do you mean I don't need to explain anything? I mean exactly that. He stared at me, waiting for more, waiting for me to accuse him, defend myself, raise my voice, give him something he could respond to. I gave him nothing. I looked back at the hydrangeas and waited for dinner to end. Desserts arrived. I didn't eat. Coffee arrived. I didn't touch that either. When the waiter discreetly slid the check beside me, exactly as arranged earlier that night, I glanced at the total without looking at the itemized receipt, placed it on the tray. The waiter returned a few minutes later with the slip to sign. I signed it, put the card back into my wallet, then I left $200 in cash on top of the bill. That was the last bill I was ever going to pay for them. I didn't say it out loud. Not to David, not to Chloe, not to anyone. I said it only inside my own head, with the same calmness I had used while reading the dessert menu earlier. Dinner ended a little after 11 sus. People started standing, putting on coats, hugging each other near the entrance. Someone suggested a group photo. David's sister organized everyone against the back wall. Chloe stood proudly in the center, still glowing with birthday girl arrogance. David stood beside her. Someone motioned for me to join. I walked over and stood at the far right side, as far from Chloe as possible, David between us. The cousin's husband held up the phone. 1, 2, 3. I smiled. The picture was taken. Afterward, David's mother walked over and hugged me. She squeezed my shoulders affectionately, the way she always did, and whispered, "Don't take Chloe seriously. You know how she gets when she drinks?" I lightly returned the hug with one hand, smiled politely, said nothing. The three of us left the restaurant together. Chloe walked several steps ahead, laughing into her phone with one of her friends. David walked silently beside me. When we reached the car, Chloe climbed into the back seat without waiting for anyone to open the door. "You driving?" David asked. "Yes." I drove the 25 minutes home without saying a word. David stared out the passenger window. Chloe stayed on her phone the entire ride. When we pulled into the garage, Chloe got out first and walked into the house without saying goodnight, straight upstairs. David stayed seated in the car for another moment. "You coming in?" I asked before he could. The normal question would have been the opposite. He looked at me strangely. Yes, of course. We went inside. David headed upstairs to change. I remained in the kitchen, still wearing the wine-stained blouse. Some parts were damp. Others had already dried stiff against the fabric. I opened the refrigerator, wasn't hungry, closed it, poured myself a glass of water and drank it slowly while staring out the kitchen window into the dark backyard. When I finally went upstairs, David was already sitting on the bed in pajamas with his phone in his hand. He looked up when I entered. "Aren't you going to change?" "I'm taking a shower first." "Diane, listen." I waited, expected an apology, a softer explanation, something. Instead, he said, "Tomorrow you need to talk to Chloe. Apologize to her. This can't keep going with both of you angry. She's very sensitive." I looked at him, didn't answer, walked into the bathroom, closed the door, dropped the stained blouse onto the floor. The shower lasted longer than usual. When I came back out, David was asleep, or pretending to be. At that moment, both possibilities felt exactly the same. I put on pajamas, climbed into bed on my side, and stared at the ceiling for nearly an hour. I didn't think about the humiliation, didn't think about the laughter, didn't think about Chloe's words or David's. I thought about the list. 14, 15, 16 separate accounts, customer service numbers, business hours, the most efficient order for the calls, the university first because it opened earliest and mattered most, then the bank to stop the automatic payments before David noticed anything, then the leasing office, then everything else. At 5:30 in the morning, I got up, dressed quietly in the dark bedroom, took my keys, my wallet, my phone, didn't look at David. I walked downstairs barefoot, put my shoes on in the kitchen, and left. I drove to my office, arrived at 6:10. The night security guard greeted me like it was any ordinary day. I took the elevator to the 11th floor, turned on only the lamp at my desk, started my computer, opened a blank spreadsheet, and began writing the list. When I finished, it was 6:42 a.m., 16 exact entries. 48 minutes until the university treasury office opened. I got a cup of water from the hallway dispenser, returned to my chair, looked at the list, looked at the clock, waited. At 7:31, I made the first call. The university. A woman with a pleasant voice answered on the second ring. I gave my name, the student account number, the last 4 digits of my card. Then I told her I was withdrawing my authorization as an external payer effective immediately, and that any remaining tuition balance would need to be handled directly with the student. "Would you like to speak with an advisor before proceeding?" "No." "You understand this may affect the student's academic standing?" "Yes." "Are you absolutely certain?" "Yes." 3 minutes and 40 seconds. I hung up. At 7:40, I called the bank, canceled the automatic payments, the car, the insurance, the gym, streaming services, the phone plan. The representative read them one by one while I answered with a simple yes. Each yes felt shorter than the last. 12 minutes. Then I hung up. At 8 Kais, I called the leasing office. The manager hadn't arrived yet. I left my number. He called back at 8:20. "Diane, hey, everything all right with the apartment? I need to remove myself as guarantor." A short pause. The manager had known me for 3 years. He knew the tenant was my stepdaughter. "Is there a problem, Diane?" "No, I'm simply withdrawing my guarantee. If you do that, she won't qualify to renew the lease." "I understand. Would you like me to contact her?" "Yes, formally, in writing. I'll handle it today." 5 minutes. I hung up. At 8:30, I called the dealership, asked about the process for voluntary vehicle surrender. The woman explained the procedure. I took notes in a small small notebook. Told her I'd call back later with a date. 4 minutes. At 8:40, I called the phone company. Removed Chloe's line from the family plan. The operator asked for confirmation from the account holder. I explained the account was entirely under my name. She requested the security code. I gave it to her. Chloe's phone service was disconnected in real time. 3 minutes. The supplementary credit card was the final item. The bank representative asked, "Would you like to issue a replacement card for another authorized user?" No. Is the card holder aware this card is being canceled? That's a family matter I'll handle personally. The card was blocked instantly. Any attempt to use it after that moment would be declined. It was 9:13 a.m., 1 hour and 42 minutes. I stood up from my chair and walked toward the office window. Morning light stretched in long golden lines between the buildings downtown. I watched a woman crossing the street holding coffee in one hand and her phone in the other, laughing at something. A city bus stopped at the corner. A businessman checked his watch impatiently. Then I returned to my desk. The spreadsheet was still open. One by one, I crossed out every completed line. All 16 were crossed out. Helen arrived at 9:30. I heard her greeting the security guard, turning on her computer, setting down her purse. A few minutes later, she knocked gently on my office door. "Good morning, Diane." "Morning. Would you like coffee?" "Yes, please." Helen had worked with me for 12 years. She looked at me for 1 second longer than usual, but asked no questions. When she returned with the coffee, she placed it quietly on my desk. I took a sip. It was good. At 9:47, my personal phone vibrated inside the desk drawer. David. I didn't answer. At 9:51, it vibrated again. 9:55, 10:02, 10:05. The first text message arrived, then the second, then the third. 27 messages over the next 30 minutes. I read none of them. I silenced the phone completely and placed it back into the drawer. At 10:45, the direct office line rang. Only 5 people had that number. I stared at the phone. 3 rings, 4. Then I answered. "Diane." David's voice, hoarse. "David, where are you?" "At the office." "Chloe called me. The university told her you withdrew tuition payments. The leasing office called. The dealership called. The phone company called." "What is happening?" "What you said last night." "What?" "What you said last night." Silence. I heard him inhale sharply, then his tone changed. No longer confused, now cautious, like someone beginning to realize the ground beneath them had shifted. "Diane, we need to talk." "Yes. Tonight, at home." "I won't be home tonight." "What?" "I'm staying at the office. We'll talk when I decide we will." "Diane, this isn't how you solve things." "I'm not solving anything. I'm acting." Then I hung up. A few seconds later, Helen knocked softly on my office door. "Diane, there's someone at reception asking to see you. No appointment. Says it's urgent." "Who is it?" "Your father-in-law." I looked up slowly. Helen stood there with her usual calm expression, but I could tell she already understood something fundamental had changed. "Tell him I don't accept walk-ins." "But, would you like me to suggest another time?" "No." She nodded once and closed the door. I looked back at the spreadsheet. 16 crossed out lines. Then I closed the file without saving it. Opened my calendar, crossed out the reminder that said, "Home, 6 p.m. Replaced it with dinner alone. At 11:30, I called my accountant. I had known Frank for 9 years. I told him I needed a complete review of every transaction made on the supplementary credit card over the last 24 months, and I wanted it that same afternoon. "Anything specific you're looking for?" he asked. "Everything." At 2:10, Helen informed me Frank had arrived. I told her to send him in. Frank carried a thick folder and a laptop. He sat across from me, opened the computer, and turned the screen in my direction. "Before we begin," he said carefully, "I need to ask if you're sure you want to see this." "Yes. There are things here I didn't expect to find." "Show me." Frank pointed to the first column. Charges well above the normal spending limit repeated over 23 months. At first they had been small, then larger. Boutiques, restaurants, luxury hotels, spas, a cosmetic clinic, a travel agency, an online course that cost $4,000 and had never been completed. "How much total?" I asked. $42,800. "In 2 years?" 23 months. I stared at the screen. Oddly enough, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you finally finish a puzzle and realize the picture had always been obvious, just scattered. "These charges were approved by the supplementary card holder," I said. "Yes, but there's something else." Frank opened another window. Monthly account statements. Every one of them digitally signed by David in his role as household financial administrator. "Your husband approved these statements 23 months in a row without dispute. You're sure he signed them?" "I have the scanned signatures. I can compare them to your marriage certificate if you'd like." "That won't be necessary." Frank waited. He knew enough to stay silent until I asked. "Anything else?" "Yes." He opened another tab. A pattern of hotel expenses appeared on the screen. Same hotel. A city 3 hours away. 12 visits over 23 months. Double rooms, room service, spa charges, restaurant bills. "Chloe?" I asked. "The supplementary card was used, but I don't believe these charges were hers." Frank pointed at the dates. "They match your husband's supposed work trips. The same trips you listed when we filed his travel deductions." I rested both hands against the desk, didn't respond immediately. "So David used Chloe's card?" "That's the most likely explanation." "The signatures?" "Chloe's signature appears on the hotel receipts, but the dates don't match her university schedule or travel records. They match David's. So Chloe signed the receipts for him? That's what it looks like." Frank half closed the laptop and leaned forward. "One more thing. The account statements were signed by David, but the email address receiving the fraud alerts wasn't yours." I looked up. "It wasn't?" "No. It was a Gmail account not listed in the original contract." "Whose?" "David's." "How do you know?" "Because the account was linked to his phone number and the phone plan was under your name." He paused. "When you shut off off the phone plan this morning, the security verification failed, and all pending alerts automatically rerouted to the primary account holder, you. This morning, Frank continued, your personal inbox received every pending alert from the last 6 months. I opened my personal email. 29 unread alerts sat there grouped together by date. Charges above spending limits, potential unauthorized activity, late payment reminders, transactions categorized as lodging and entertainment. I closed the inbox without opening them individually. Frank, yes, I need a full report. Dates, amounts, businesses, locations, and a comparison with David's travel schedule. Digital and printed copies? Yes. When do you need it? Friday. Done. I nodded once, then added, and I need the name of a divorce attorney. A good one. Discreet. Frank didn't ask questions. He pulled a sheet of paper from his folder, wrote down a name and phone number, then slid it across the desk. She's the best in the city. Tell her I referred you. Thank you. Frank packed up his laptop. At the door, he stopped and looked back at me. Diane, are you all right? Yes. You seem calm. I am. He nodded and left. I remained alone in the office. I looked at the attorney's name, folded the paper in half, placed it inside my top drawer, then I reopened my personal email, selected all 29 alerts, and moved them into a new folder titled Documentation. At 4:30, Helen knocked again. Diane, the reservation for 7 has been confirmed. Table for 1. Thank you, Helen. One more thing. Your husband called 4 more times. I told him you were in meetings all day. Thank you. Helen lingered at the doorway for a second. Do you need anything else? Not right now. She closed the door. I reopened the drawer, took out the folded paper, dialed the number. The attorney's assistant gave me an appointment for Thursday at 10:40 in the morning. I slept at the office for 4 nights. The 5th night, I stayed at a hotel. The 6th night, too. Thursday morning at 10 a.m, I met the attorney. Her name was Margaret. She greeted me with coffee and a yellow legal pad. I handed her Frank's folder. She reviewed everything silently for nearly 20 minutes. Finally, she looked up. Diane, with what you've brought me, this divorce can be clean or devastating. Your choice. Clean. Are you sure? You have grounds for much more. I don't want more. I paused. I want it finished. Margaret nodded and started taking notes. We spent the next few hours working through the terms. At 2 p.m. that afternoon, Helen called the new phone I had asked her to get for me. Diane, your husband is here. Alone? He's with Chloe. I thought for a moment. Tell them I'll see them in 15 minutes. Small conference room. Not my office. I arrived at the office at 2:22. David and Chloe were sitting side by side at the small conference table, each with a glass of water. David stood when I entered. Chloe didn't. Diane, thank you for seeing us, David said. I sat across from them, didn't answer. Chloe wants to say something. I looked at Chloe. Her arms were crossed tightly. I'm sorry about the wine, she muttered without looking directly at me. I was upset. I didn't think about what I said. All right, she blinked. All right? Yes, she waited. David waited too. Both of them expected more. I gave them nothing. So now what? Chloe asked. What do you mean? Are you giving my stuff back? No. Her expression hardened immediately. What do you mean no? I mean exactly that. I folded my hands calmly on the table. You or your father can pay for college. The apartment lease is canceled. The car gets returned next week. The card stays blocked. If you want a phone, open an account under your own name. Chloe opened her mouth, then closed it again. She looked at David. David looked at me. Diane, you can't do this. It's already done. She's our daughter. She's your daughter. I held David's gaze, and she's 21 years old. David took a slow breath. His tone changed completely. Soft now. Careful. Diane, I know you're hurt because of the birthday dinner. I'm sorry. Truly. What I said was wrong. I looked at him steadily. David, I said quietly, do you recognize the charges from the Alameda Hotel? Everything in his face froze. Chloe looked between us. What? She asked. The Alameda Hotel? 12 visits over the last 23 months? I continued calmly. Paid using Chloe's supplementary card. David didn't answer. Chloe's eyes widened. Wait, was that the Sedona trip, Dad? The one you said was for work? David kept staring at me. His face had changed. No longer the face of someone trying to negotiate. Now it was the face of someone calculating exactly how much I knew. Diane, he said carefully, that's something we can discuss another time. There is no other time. We can talk privately. We talk now, or we don't talk at all. David swallowed. Diane, I stood up. Margaret, my attorney, will contact both of you sometime this week. I looked at David first. For you, regarding the divorce. Then at Chloe. For you, regarding the unauthorized charges on your card. $42,800 over 23 months. What? Chloe nearly shouted. Unauthorized charges? What are you talking about? The receipts you signed. I didn't sign anything. Yes, you did. Every hotel receipt, every boutique purchase. I kept my voice level. Your signature appears on every document. If you claim those weren't yours, then it becomes identity fraud and potentially a criminal matter. If you admit they were yours, then it becomes debt. I paused. You can decide which one it is. Chloe stared at her father. David didn't look back at her. Dad, Chloe whispered. Say something. David said nothing. I walked out of the conference room and returned to my office. Closed the door behind me. A few minutes later, Helen appeared quietly. They left. Together? Yes, but they were arguing. At 6:09, I received a message from the leasing office. The apartment lease would not be renewed. The tenant had until the final day of the month to vacate the property. At 7:30 that night, David called my new number. Diane, David, are you coming home? No. Chloe has nowhere to stay after the 1st of the month. She can stay with you. Diane, that's your home too. No. I leaned back in my chair. That house was purchased by me in cash before we got married. It's in my name, and I'm selling it. Silence. Long silence. Finally, he asked quietly, when did you decide all this? I closed my eyes eyes briefly. David, I didn't decide this in 1 week. Then I opened them again. You decided it over 15 years. I just stopped pretending I didn't notice. And I hung up. That night, I ate alone at the restaurant where Helen had made my reservation. I ordered the steak I had always wanted but never allowed myself to buy. Aged ribeye, medium rare. I ate slowly. The waiter asked if I was expecting someone. No. Dessert? No, thank you. Just the check. I paid with my primary card, left cash on the table for the tip, then walked out alone. Margaret called Tuesday morning. David had hired an attorney, a well-known one. The first meeting between both legal teams was scheduled for Friday. Diane, Margaret said, your husband wants to negotiate before the hearing. He's asking to speak with you privately. What for? He didn't say. What do you recommend? That you hear him out once with me present. I agreed. The meeting was scheduled for Wednesday at 5 in the afternoon at Margaret's office. I arrived 10 minutes early. David was already there, alone, no attorney. He wore a dark blue suit I had never seen before. His hands rested stiffly in his lap. Before leading me inside, Margaret spoke quietly near the doorway. He asked to speak with you alone, she said. I refused. I'll stay in the room, but I'll let him begin. I nodded and walked in, sat across from David. Margaret sat farther down the table with her legal pad. David looked directly at me. Before lawyers, before paperwork, before any of this, he began softly. I want to ask you for one thing. I'm listening. Stop. Stop what? This. The divorce. Selling the house. The debt agreements with Chloe. All of it. And in exchange, we start over. His voice trembled slightly now. Therapy, counseling, whatever you want. I'll take responsibility for the $42,800. I'll sign a written confession if I have to. Anything. I stared at him for several seconds, then asked, who is the woman from the Alameda Hotel? David glanced briefly toward Margaret. Margaret didn't look up from her notes. Diane, David whispered. That doesn't matter anymore. It matters. It's someone who's no longer in my life. When did it end? 4 months ago. Who is she? David inhaled slowly. A client from work, someone I met 2 years ago. He looked exhausted suddenly. Please don't make me say more here. You're not here because of me, I replied calmly. You're here because of you. David lowered his eyes. For the first time in 15 years, I saw him without the performance. No confidence, no control, just someone tired of holding together a lie. Diane, he said quietly, I know I ruined everything. I know the birthday dinner was the final straw, but we spent 15 years together. 15 years can't disappear in 1 week. I leaned back slightly. David, I didn't erase those 15 years. My voice remained calm. You erased them every time you signed a statement, knowing there were hotel charges from the place where you were meeting her. I paused. Every time you let Chloe sign receipts to cover for you. Another pause. And every time you sat me at a family table so I could pay the bill for people helping you humiliate me. David looked up again. His eyes were wet now, but he wasn't crying. That's not fair. No, I said softly. It's exact. He stared at me silently, then finally whispered, I loved you. I almost smiled. 2 years ago, I said. My father told me something I didn't understand at the time. I folded my hands together. He said there are men who choose you because they love you, and men who choose you because you're useful. I looked directly into his eyes. He was right. David closed his eyes for a long moment, then opened them again. So there's nothing I can do? Yes, I answered. You can sign the papers Margaret sends you on Friday. You can take responsibility for the $40,800 so Chloe doesn't end up with a fraud investigation, and you can stop calling my new phone. David stared down at the table, then quietly asked, are you going to tell Chloe about the hotel? No. Why not? Because it isn't my story to tell. I paused. If you want your daughter to know who you really are, then you tell her. David stayed silent. One more thing, I added. He looked up. I am selling the house, but not immediately. I'll wait 3 months so the two of you can figure things out first. David nodded slowly, picked up his keys, stood. For a second, he just looked at me, then asked the question I think he already knew the answer to. Do you really not love me anymore? I held his gaze. David, I stopped loving you a long time ago. A small pause. I just didn't admit it to myself until Chloe's birthday. David left the room without another word. Margaret quietly closed her notebook. That was the right thing to do, she said. I know. How do you feel? I thought about it honestly before answering. Fine. That night, for the first time in 12 days, I drove back to the house. David wasn't there. Chloe wasn't there either. The place felt hollow, silent. I went upstairs to the bedroom and opened the closet, took out 2 suitcases, packed my clothes, my books, personal documents, the framed photograph of my father, the watch he had left me. Then I carried the suitcases downstairs and loaded them into the car. Before leaving, I walked into the study. There was an envelope on the desk with my name written in David's handwriting. I opened it. Inside was a 3-page letter. I read it standing up. It wasn't an apology. It was an explanation about the client, about loneliness, about how everything had started, about Chloe, and how Chloe supposedly knew nothing about a feeling David described as losing himself. When I finished reading, I folded the pages carefully and slipped them back into the envelope. Then I left it on the desk. I didn't take it with me. I turned off the lights, locked the front door, and drove back to the hotel where I'd been staying. At 1 in the morning, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I checked the message. My name is Carmen Rivera. I need to speak with you. It's about Chloe. I know it's late. Call me when you can. I stared at the screen for several seconds, saved the number, turned off the light, and went to sleep. I called Carmen Rivera Thursday morning at 9 a.m. We met at a small coffee shop near my office. She was a woman in her early 50s, thin, plain clothes, a worn leather folder tucked under her arm. Thank you for meeting me, Mrs. Diane. Just Diane. I nodded. Diane, I'm Chloe Chloe's biological mother. That didn't surprise me. Something inside me had already expected it. How did you find me? I've been trying to contact Chloe for years, she explained quietly. David changed numbers, changed addresses twice. My letters kept coming back, she hesitated. Last week, I saw a leasing notice connected to your name. It mentioned the guarantor for my daughter's apartment had withdrawn support. I found your company after that. What do you want from me? Nothing from you, she said immediately. I just want to know if Chloe even knows I exist. She doesn't. Carmen nodded slowly, not shocked, almost like she had rehearsed hearing that answer for years. Did David tell her I was dead? Yes. She lowered her eyes briefly. For 16 years, I've paid child support every month, she said quietly. David never allowed me to see her. She opened the folder and pushed it toward me. Inside were copies of monthly payments dating back 16 years, returned letters stamped unknown recipient, court documents, restraining orders that had later been dismissed for lack of evidence. Every page carried David's signature. Why come now? I asked. Because Chloe turned 21. She folded her hands together. I'm no longer a mother trying to force rights onto a child. I'm just a woman who wants her daughter to have the option of deciding whether she wants to know me. She gave a faint smile. That's why I waited. I closed the folder and handed it back. Carmen, I'm not the person who should give Chloe this information. It isn't my story. I understand. I thought for a moment, then nodded slowly. I'll give you my attorney's number, Margaret. She can explain how to contact Chloe legally without going through David. Carmen's expression softened immediately. Thank you. One more thing, I added. When Chloe meets you, if she chooses to, my name stays out of it. Of course. I'm not part of that conversation. You won't be. We finished our coffee in silence. Then I paid the bill and left. The divorce was finalized 2 months later. David accepted every condition. He took responsibility for the $42,800 and arranged a payment plan. Chloe signed an agreement acknowledging the debt under her name, but David officially assumed it to avoid fraud charges. The house remained legally mine. David moved into a rented apartment. 4 months after the divorce was finalized, I sold the house. Then I bought another one, smaller, in a different neighborhood. No memories attached to it. Chloe got a job as a cashier, then another job at a coffee shop. Later, she enrolled in a public university with a partial scholarship. She paid the remaining tuition herself while working. Carmen and Chloe met 6 months after my conversation with her. Margaret had guided her through the legal process exactly as promised. Chloe called me the same afternoon she met her. It was the first time she'd called me since the conference room. Diane, Chloe, I met my biological mother today. I know. Silence. Then, you knew? Yes. For how long? Since before your father signed the divorce papers. Why didn't you tell me? Because it wasn't my place to. A long pause followed. Then she asked quietly, can I buy you coffee sometime? Yes. We met the following Saturday. Chloe arrived 15 minutes late. She wore simple clothes, no makeup. She looked thinner, older somehow. She didn't hug me. Hi, Diane. Hi, Chloe. She sat down and ordered black coffee. She didn't talk about Carmen, didn't talk about David either. She talked about work, classes, the tiny room she was renting near campus. I listened. When the coffee was nearly finished, she reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope, set it on the table between us. What's this? The first $250 toward the $42,800. I looked at the envelope. I know my father is paying it, Chloe continued quietly, but I want to pay you back myself, month by month, every dollar. Chloe, please, Diane. I studied her face for several seconds, then took the envelope and slipped it into my coat pocket. One more thing, she said softly. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me for what I said at my birthday dinner. She swallowed hard. But I've spent 6 months thinking about those words, and I still can't find a single reason why I thought I had the right to say them. I didn't answer immediately. Finally, I said, I don't have to forgive you. She looked up. I just need to be able to look at you without feeling what I felt that night. A pause. And today, I can. Chloe nodded slowly, didn't cry. When the check arrived, she paid for her own coffee. We walked together to the parking lot afterward. Before leaving, she extended her hand toward me. I shook it. Thanks for coming, Diane. Thanks for calling, Chloe. I drove home, the new home, parked in the garage, went upstairs, opened the kitchen window, made myself dinner, and ate alone at the table with my father's photograph leaning against the wall across from me. At 8 your Margaret texted me. Everything finalized. Final documents are in your email. I replied, thank you, Margaret. Then I turned off my phone, poured myself a glass of wine, and raised it slightly in silence. Not toward anyone, just a small gesture above the kitchen table. The stained white blouse was still inside a drawer at the office. I had never thrown it away, never shown it to anyone, never used it against anybody. It stayed there folded neatly. A reminder of the final night of something that had already died long before the wine ever touched the fabric. I took the first sip, and it tasted just fine.